When we talk about genetics, we talk about Mendelian genetics, named after the famous scientist Gregor Mendel. He was born in Austria about 200 years ago and was extremely poor. So in order to get an education, he became a monk. Now he was an extremely sharp individual and he really liked peas. We'll come back to that later on. And when he was he grew a lot of pea plants and he saw some mathematical relationships in the pea plants that he grew. And from them, he was able to infer a lot of modern genetics, which it took us decades to catch up with. The guy was a genius. He discovered that there was a unit of inheritance that we now know as a gene. He discovered genes ages before we knew how they worked. In general, he was a bit of a legend. He is known as the father of modern genetics and is responsible for a vast array of scientific advancements. Okay, I mentioned before he was fond of peas. I'm not sure if he liked eating them, but he really liked growing them. He used them as a test organism because if you're investigating genetics, you need something that will reproduce quickly, is quite cheap to obtain and to keep, and in the case of peas, you can get them to self-fertilize. He really liked peas. Alright, first thing Mendel did was he spent years obtaining two strains of pea plant, one that was true breeding and would only produce green pods over many, many years, and one that was true breeding for yellow pea plants and would only provide yellow pea pods, again over many, many years. Mendel took pollen from one of his true breeding strains and used it to fertilize the other. We call this generation the pea generation for parents, not for peas, just pea for parents. And when you cross them, you get offspring, posh name for children. We call this one the G1 generation, not because they're all turned out green, but because G stands for generation. Now, as you can see here, when he crossed the yellow plants with the green ones, he found that no matter how many he did, they all came out green. Now, because he was using pea plants, he was able to get them to fertilize themselves, something that animals can't do without being really acrobatic or flexible. So he crossed these two offspring with each other, and this time he got a little different result. He found that most of the offspring turned out green as well, but 1 in every 4 turned out yellow again. So something strange has happened here. Something's kind of been hidden for a generation. By the way, we label this the G2 or second generation offspring. You might remember this 3-to-1 ratio from when I inflicted this PTC paper on you, the one that tasted like Brussels sprouts. And some of you were disgusted. Most of you, 3/4 of you were thinking, what on earth is this? I was one of them, by the way. Whereas 25% of you thought, there's no fuss. So this 3-to-1 ratio, he found this in his pea plants. Now, Mendel was a bit of a legend, and from these results, and from some other experiments he ran, he figured out that there were some traits or characteristics that were dominant over others that would win out. There is also some unit that caused these traits, and while these units never mixed, sometimes they were kind of hidden for a generation and might pop up later on down the line. Now, Mendel was decades ahead of his time, and it was only years later when we actually physically looked at chromosomes under microscopes that people started looking at his research again. And we now know that these units of inheritance that Mendel discovered, and he just kind of knew they were there from the maths, we now call them genes. 3 key words that will keep cropping up again and again in this topic are chromosomes, genes, and alleles. Now, if you remember, chromosomes are the condensed length of DNA that's inside your cells. Each species of organism has a certain amount of these chromosomes. We've got 46 in our cells. A gene is a part of a chromosome. So it's if you take a certain section of the DNA strand from one part to another, it will be a gene, an area that will make a protein that will do something. So it might be the gene that will make your eyes green or blue or whatever, or you might have blonde hair, brown hair, whatever. This gene will cause that to happen. Alleles are 2 different versions of the same gene. If you remember, your chromosomes occur in pairs, so for each gene you've got two possibilities for it. Each of these individual possibilities is called an allele. Might be worth looking at that again. The nuclei of your cells are made up of several lengths of DNA which are called chromosomes. Different organisms, different species have different numbers of chromosomes in their cells. We've got 46 in our adult cells. A gene is a particular length of a chromosome or part of it, and it will control one particular characteristic. And an allele is the alternate version of the gene that you get from the other chromosome. That might be worth going over again. Although if we keep going over it again, we'll end up in some sort of time loop. Doc Brown will get angry with me. I'll tell him you did it, but he'll still be angry. So let's move on. We look a little like our parents because we've inherited characteristics from them through their genes. But because we've got two parents, we inherit some of our characteristics from our dad and some from our mum. This is why we look similar but not identical to each of them, because they'll have each provided different alleles. Here's a picture of my family. There's me in the middle. The beautiful lady on my right arm is my mum. The beautiful lady on my left arm is my granny, and the little nipper there is my cousin. Now, if you look, we've all got very similar characteristics. Got very, very blue eyes, but there's some differences there as well. I've got kind of brown hair, whereas my mum's got quite blonde hair, along with my cousin Eve. Obviously, my granny's got grey hair, but that's time. It'll do it to all of you. Okay, again, going over these keywords, I'll keep hammering them. The nuclei of your cells are made up of chromosomes. These chromosomes contain genes which will determine many of your characteristics. Now, all of your cells, skin cells, liver cells, bone cells, whatever, no matter what you look at, they will each have 46 chromosomes in their nucleus in total, with a couple of exceptions. Sperm and egg cells, the gametes, obviously won't have 46 chromosomes. They have half the DNA because they need to combine one half from the sperm, one half from the egg to make a new person. So they've only got 23 chromosomes. And in addition, red blood cells don't have any chromosomes because they don't have any nucleus. They're kind of an exception. We'll be looking at them in the specialized cells section. Okay, so as I say, you've got 46 chromosomes in total. 23 of these will have come from your dad via the sperm, and 23 of these will have come from your mum via the egg. Because siblings, brothers and sisters, inherit characteristics from the same parents, they again will look very similar to each other, but not exactly the same. There are a couple of exceptions here we want to look at, which are twins. Twins come, ironically enough, in two types. There are fraternal twins, where two separate eggs are released from the ovaries at the same time and get fertilized by different sperm. So these will develop into two genetically very different children. They just happen to be born at the same time. Twins can also be identical twins. This happens when, after fertilization, when the sperm and the egg have fertilized, the developing embryo splits into two. Now, because they'll have started from the same sperm and egg, they will be genetically identical. Obviously, as the twins grow up, they will become different from one another because of environmental factors. And there's also an area of genetics here which suggests that they will be different from each other because of a more advanced bit of genetics, which frankly, I don't really understand. Okay, we're going to have a look at how your gender or sex is determined. This is a karyotype. It's a lined up section of all the chromosomes inside a human cell. And as you can see, there's 23 pairs. And for the first 22, they match up. It's pretty easy to kind of match one with the other. The exception being the last set, the X and Y chromosomes. And these are what's going to determine whether you turn out as a male or a female. Let's look at Y. Girls and women have two X chromosomes. So when the cells in their ovaries do meiosis to produce gametes, they can only produce egg cells that each have an X chromosome. No matter how many times, they will all have an X chromosome. Men and boys, on the other hand, have an X and a Y chromosome. So when the cells in their testicles do meiosis to provide gametes, they can provide two types. A sperm cell with an X chromosome and a sperm cell with a Y chromosome. And because they're doing meiosis, they provide them in roughly the same amounts, 50-50. So when an egg is released from the ovary and sperm are ejaculated from the penis, the sperm want to get to the egg to fertilize it. Look out! That egg cell's got laser defense grid. Pew! Pew! Dodge! Pew! Got there, way! So when the sperm cell fertilizes the egg, when the sperm reaches the egg cell, it will fertilize it. Yeah. Here we've got a diagram showing all the possible sperm cells combined with all the possible egg cells. Remember, this is just a diagram to figure out the probability of what type of children you get. Obviously, you'd only really get one egg cell at a time to be fertilized. But if you were to kind of match them up, you'll find that there's two possible arrangements. You can either have a YX situation on the left or an XX situation on the right. Again, this will be caused by which sperm cell reaches the egg. So if you look at the ones on the left, that YX chromosome should be familiar because we started with men who had XY chromosomes. So that's how you get men. Whereas on the other side of it, the ladies had XX chromosomes, and that's how you end up with girls. That's just another diagram showing it. I'm just introducing this to you because we'll be looking at it in a bit more detail later on. But for now, it's a 50-50 chance of being a male or a female. Anyway, well done. Sorry for that bit about the laser defense grid on the eggs. Obviously, egg cells don't have laser defense grids. They use anti-aircraft missiles. In any case, here's a picture of a killer whale. Aren't they cute? Never mind the fact that they're absolutely voracious predators and would batter a great white without a shadow of a doubt. Anyway, well done.